The world has a long and varied history that spans many millions of years. For most of that time, the marine depths have held many of our world's ultimate horrors, infinitely dark abysses and sea monsters of all shapes and sizes. However, what if we told you that there was a point in time when you were better off in the ocean, a time when everything from the climate and wildlife on land would have been out to kill you? Well, there was, and we're here to talk about it. So let's step into our time machine and venture to this truly unique time. Lapingian. The Lapingian, an often under-discussed time in prehistory, was the final epoch of the Permian period and the Paleozoic era. The epoch lasted from 259 million years ago to 251 million years ago and followed directly after the Guadalupian epoch. It was followed by the early Triassic, which means that these were the days before the dinosaurs. During this time, the Earth was very different from what we know today. For starters, the days were shorter, about 22 hours long compared to the 24 we have today. This is because the Moon was closer to Earth, giving it a shorter orbit. Secondly, most of the world's land masses were still part of Pangaea, the supercontinent made up of what we call Africa, India, Antarctica, the Americas, and Eurasia today. Other places like Southeast Asia, Siberia, and Central Asia were islands of varying sizes. The oceans were different too. The waters within the ring formed by Pangaea and its surrounding islands were the Tethys Ocean and Paleotethys Ocean. Meanwhile, the rest of the planet, or more than 60% of its surface, was covered by the almost unending Panthalassic Ocean. The Panthalassic was almost twice the size of the modern-day Pacific, which is a frightening thought. After all, if this ocean was bigger than anything we have today, wouldn't it have hosted even more frightening things than ever? Well, in theory. But in reality, there is little evidence that this specific time had marine monsters of exceptional note. The Helicoprion, for example, was one of the largest known marine predators of the Permian, but it is believed to have gone extinct before the Lapingian. This shark-like beast sported an iconic whirljaw that experts believe was a specialty tool for hunting soft-bodied invertebrates like squids. There are no known fossils or teeth that date back to the Lapingian that suggest that there was a shark or shark-like fish that matched or exceeded the 26-foot-long Helicoprion in size. The mosasaurs, another iconic group of aquatic predators, wouldn't emerge until the Cretaceous period, while Megalodon, the most fearsome shark ever, was even more recent. Of course, even with our modern technology, the ocean remains largely unexplored, meaning there is a ton of stuff we don't know about the world beneath the waves, past or present. For all we know, the Panthalassic may have teemed with massive jellyfish and squids that ate sharks and other large fish, but failed to leave adequate fossils for us to know. However, there is no proof of that. Most of the Lapingian sea predators we know of today were relatively small and comparable to the small modern sharks no one really worries about. One major factor behind the lack of oceanic megafauna was the Capetanian extinction event, which marked the end of the Guadalupian epoch. The Capetanian is largely attributed to mass volcanic emissions which tanked oxygen levels in the oceans while raising acidity. These factors led to conditions being too harsh for many species, including the biggest sea creatures. The Capetanian is believed to have been the fifth worst extinction event in history, with marine life taking the hardest hit. Many animal groups and clades were wiped out completely, while a lucky and hardy few managed to regroup and carry on. Being small at that time would have been advantageous because a small body requires less oxygen than a massive one. On land, the world was also reeling. However, the terrestrial world did not have its entire biochemical makeup altered by the disaster, so life could bounce back more quickly. During that time, the world was home to a wide range of creatures. One of the most widespread and successful animal groups of this time was the therapsids, creatures that blurred the lines between reptiles and mammals. In fact, modern taxonomists refer to these animals as proto-mammals or paramammals, rather than the mammal-like reptiles they were traditionally described as. One early therapsid group that dominated the land before time was the Dinocephalians. These creatures were diverse and included herbivorous and carnivorous species, as well as species with omnivorous tendencies. Dinocephalians came on the scene during the Middle Permian, around 270 million years ago, and were wiped out by the Capetanian extinction. In their wake, a power vacuum formed, and many mean beasts vied for supremacy in the decimated lands. Enter the Gorgonopsids, another group of nasty therapsids. These monsters, named after the horrific Gorgons of Greek mythology, were tetrapods with bulky physiques, long necks, and narrow skulls that culminated in scary-looking teeth. Among these teeth were highly pronounced canines, which earned them the title of history's first saber-toothed killers. Some species had elongated upper canines, while others also had long lower canines. These teeth were serrated, a clear sign of the gore the Gorgonopsids were capable of. Gorgonopsids emerged around 265 million years ago, but the earliest species was small and no bigger than Jack Russell Terriers, meaning they lived in the shadow of the massive Dinocephalians. However, when the larger therapsids died off, the Gorgonopsids had the opportunity to grow, and grow they did. The biggest member of the Gorgonopsidae family was Inostrancevia, which was actually a genus made up of a few species that were the largest terrestrial predators in the Lapingian. These creatures grew to 11 feet in length and could weigh as much as 660 pounds, while their saber canines could be nearly 6 inches long. Some estimates give it a much larger size of 1,000 pounds plus, closer to brown or polar bears. There is still a lot we don't know about these killers, including how they hunted and killed. However, one look at these nightmares and it's obvious that being caught in those jaws was a bad way to go. Speculation on how they hunted ranges from ambush to classic running prey down. When it comes to killing, some experts claim that it favored maiming, clamping onto prey and ripping off chunks with ferocious force. Others claim it opted to deliver 1 or 2 mortal wounds before waiting for blood loss to do its thing. Inostrancavia, like the other Gorgonopsid families, was widespread, though mostly concentrated in the northern parts of Pangaea, which included non-Siberian Russia and India. However, large Gorgonopsids were found all over the supercontinent, even as far south as South Africa and Antarctica. Doubtless, all animals walking the land at that time looked over their shoulders constantly, quaking with fear over the thought of Gorgon jaws. Another noteworthy group of Gorgonopsids was Rubiginae, a subfamily that dominated the African parts of Pangaea. Rubigines were not only some of the biggest therapsids of their time, but also the most diverse, with more genera and species than any other Gorgonopsid subfamily. None grew to be quite as large as Inostrancavia, but that didn't make any difference to their victims. Skull remains show that while smaller, Rubigines had even finer serrations on their teeth than Inostrancavia, which could have made them more efficient killers. Slightly smaller frames may have made them faster and more capable of chasing you too. Away from the Gorgonopsids, the Lapingian also saw other scary predators. Therocephalians, another clade of therapsids, were also on the prowl. These saber-toothed beast heads were among the closest relatives of cynodonts, the common ancestor of modern mammals. Therocephalians had typical therapsid features, long bodies, stocky builds, and large heads, yet they were a little different too. They didn't grow as large as the bigger Gorgonopsids, and their heads were typically wider with straighter teeth. Some Therocephalians were likely full-time herbivores too, but most preferred to eat flesh. Therocephalians thrived and diversified during their run between 266 and 242 million years ago. Some, like Ictiodosuchids, even became semi-aquatic, maybe to escape the overcrowded therapsid death zones on land. There have even been suggestions that some were venomous. The scariest Therocephalian was Moscarinus, which was about the size of a jaguar. With its sharp saber teeth and huge head, it was a brutal killer that competed with large Gorgonopsids for apex predator status. A larger Therocephalian, Megaweitzia, also lived in the Lapingian, but it wasn't as widespread and died out in the first half of the epoch. Most remains have only been found in Euro-Russia, but these indicate that Megaweitzia grew to the size of a tiger, maybe bigger. While therapsids ruled the show, we can't forget about actual reptiles that were around at the time too. Notable examples include the crocodiliform-like Proterosuchids and Croniosuchia that lurked in and around freshwater bodies, preying on thirsty, unsuspecting wanderers. That brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you for watching, and we hope you learned something new about our world's rich history. Let us know in the comments, would you survive the brutal Lapingian wildlands? If so, how would you go about it? We also hope you'll take the time to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon too, so you never miss out on more awesome animal content. All that's left is to say thanks again and see you next time.